Okay, so welcome to the webinar, the last webinar LARK is organizing this year. I'm Susanna Sukovic, LARK's chair. And at the very beginning, I would like to acknowledge and pay my respects to traditional owners of the land on which I stand, the Wongal people of the Eora Nation. Now, for people who are new to these gatherings, LARK stands for Library Applied Research Kollektive. We are an ALIA group, and ALIA again stands for Australian Library and Information Association. LARK has been supporting and promoting research in practice for the last 9 years. So next year we are celebrating 10 years, which is quite nice and substantial. So today we are going to discuss whether a PhD is useful in library practice and how it's being used. But I would also like to mention that in this difficult year, LARK is actually finishing the year on a high note. We are going to launch or relaunch the South Australian LARK chapter. Our lead in South Australia is Dr. Catherine Howard, who is going to be our facilitator today. And actually she's our new treasurer as well. So the newest LARK star. So I'm going to hand over to Catherine, but I would ask Catherine, before we start and introduce our wonderful speakers, could you tell us a little bit about what's in store for South Australian chapter?
Thanks, Susanna. I was actually just going to put a link in the chat box so that to the interview that you popped on the LARK blog to tell everybody about the LARK chapter. But yeah, just hoping to create a community of practice for people in South Australia. Hopefully, when we're relatively okay here in South Australia in terms of COVID, but when we're able to meet again more regularly, hopefully we can just have some informal chats, some get-togethers. My role in the LISRA project, I'll put a link up to that as well, has really heightened the need for research in our profession, and it's something that I'm really passionate about. So looking forward to getting a few in-person sessions happening next year for LARK. But I think largely we will still continue a lot of online things, and it will be a national thing as we have been in the past. So Ninamani, everyone, hello. I'd like to begin today by acknowledging that I'm hosting this webinar from the lands of the Kaurna people of the Adelaide Plains. I acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. And I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. So thank you all for coming today. I hope for most of you it is around about a lunchtime thing and you've been able to grab some food and log on. I'm really positive that this is going to be a very thought-provoking and an illuminating event. We've got 3 wonderful speakers who will talk about their decision to undertake a PhD, and Jo's one of the lucky ones, she's finished. So she'll maybe have a bit of a slightly different insight into having completed a PhD and what it means for her library practice. So some people think, and I've seen this not only in literature, but I've seen and heard whispers around practice that when you have a PhD, that the only career path for you is to go into academia, and that's absolutely not the case at all. Not in any field, not just our field. So I'm hoping that today's speakers will go some way to dispel those myths and talk about what having a PhD and doing a PhD brings to their professional role. There will be time for questions, but I'd like to leave the Q&A until after all of our speakers have spoken. Please pop your questions in the chat box, or if you would rather voice your question, I'm happy to unmute you or for you to unmute yourself. So without further ado, I'll hand over to our first speaker, Fiona Salisbury from LARK. Oh, before I do that, I'll put their bios into the chat box as well, so you can read about them because you don't want to hear me prattling on. So over to you, Fiona.
Thanks very much, Catherine, and thank you for inviting me to share some thoughts on this topic. It's a great topic and I'm very happy to talk about it. I'm zooming in today from Wurundjeri country, and I'd like to acknowledge the elders of country and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. My decision and motivation to do a PhD really crept up on me over a number of years, and something that I've always been interested in is connecting theory, practice and evidence, particularly in my work related to library learning services. And this interest was my reason for doing a graduate certificate in higher education, which I did in 2012. And that course really made me aware of higher education as a field of study in a way that I hadn't been introduced to before. And it opened up a whole world of scholarship that I hadn't been exposed to and made me think much more deeply about library practice and the theory that is important to library practice, and also the higher education conversations that library professionals need to be involved in. And as a result of that course, I became curious about the different ways of exploring and putting these things together. And at the end of the course, I started to think about doing a PhD. And I was encouraged by the academic staff and colleagues that I'd met in the course. And with their encouragement, I made the decision and I started my PhD in 2016. And I've got about 18 months, maybe 2 years to go. And I feel quite a bit of tension around that because I want to complete, but I also want the journey to continue because I'm just, I enjoy it so much and I love it so much. It's a journey that has enriched my life professionally, personally, intellectually, and I'm very thankful that I've had that opportunity and grateful to the people that I've met along the way. So what makes it so good and why do LIS practitioners do PhDs? If you do a PhD, I think there are benefits for you as a professional, for your workplace, and for the profession, the LIS profession more generally. In my PhD, I'm working with higher education theory, ideas of the university, ideas of the academic library, and exploring professional and academic relationships across those domains. But regardless of your research area, I think your research always has benefits for the workplace. It's inevitable, really, because as you start to inhabit the role of researcher, and work with researchers in your discipline, and I mean the discipline that you are researching, you naturally approach your professional work differently. Your researcher identity and your professional identity are brought together in a way that is really empowering, both in the workplace and for the LIS profession. For me, doing a PhD has definitely informed the conversations that we have in the library and some of the ideas I've introduced that have come out of my research, and some of the areas I've encouraged the library team to explore. And that in turn has changed practical aspects of how we work and the relationships we have across the university. My research has changed the possibilities I see for the academic library and what it contributes to the community and how it is conceived as a place in the community. And that flows through to how I work and the logics that I work with every day. So I can see that the research I'm involved in has a range of influences, and some of those have very practical outcomes in how I approach my everyday work as a university librarian. And for me, that might be in strategy or project development or planning, but I think that would be the case in whatever library role or other professional role that you might be in. And when I'm talking about research activity, I'm not just talking about your own focus in your PhD, but about the broader activity that comes with being part of a group of researchers and students, and how that gets brought into your practice. So one example for me is my experience of being in a group called Thesis Thinkers. Thesis Thinkers is a group of PhD supervisors and students, and the group was started by my supervisor and some of her colleagues. And the idea was to bring together doctoral students researching higher education. And I might add here too that your supervisor in this journey is so important in terms of the experience you have. So in Thesis Thinkers, we meet monthly. We share work in progress. We read and write together. We go on writing retreats together each year. We support each other, we encourage each other, and we participate in development activities together. It's an incredibly collegial environment, and I've benefited a lot from this experience and knowing the people in that group. A few years ago, I started wondering whether some aspects of the benefits of my experience in Thesis Thinkers could be transferred to the professional library environment to help staff intentionally reflect on their practice through writing about what they do in a collegial environment. So after talking to a colleague at another university, we brought together interested staff in our teams to reflect and write about their practice in a supported environment. And after many workshops, writing and rewriting together, the result is an edited volume called Connecting the Library to the Curriculum. So this book project has been a contribution to our respective libraries in that through the process, staff have reflected on and improved programs and services. It's been a professional development activity in the cross-institutional writing workshops that we've facilitated. And it's been a contribution to the profession through publication. But it's also a project I wouldn't even have thought of, or if I did think of it, I wouldn't have had the confidence to execute it if I hadn't been an apprentice researcher learning from experienced colleagues. So for me, it's not just doing a PhD is not just about the specific outcomes of the research that you might do in your PhD that contributes to the profession and adds knowledge to the profession. And it's not just that is important, but it's about the way the PhD experience influences how you think, how you act, and the connections that you make and the conversations you start. And I think these things are equally important to you as a professional, to the workplace, and to the LIS profession. So if you are thinking you might like to do it, I'm probably the wrong person to talk to, because I would heartily encourage you and you know, tell you to really seriously think about it. I think doing a PhD is about what you can give back to the profession. It's about strengthening the profession. You don't have to do it to do your job well, and you certainly don't have to do it to succeed and make a difference in the LIS profession. But it's an absolute pleasure, it's a delight, and it has so many benefits on so many levels. So that's my thoughts on this topic. Thanks, Catherine.
Fantastic. Thanks, Fiona. I think you're absolutely the perfect person to talk to if anyone is thinking of doing a PhD. And I'll just echo what Fiona said there too. I absolutely loved every minute of my PhD. And if I could do another one tomorrow, I would do it just like that. It was just such a joy. So yes, you do hear horror stories, and yes, people do have some awful times, but it can be such a rewarding, it is such a rewarding experience. Okay, so thank you very much, Fiona. I'll hand over to Edward.
Thanks, Catherine. And I'd like to acknowledge the Darramurrugal people where I'm working today. So for my talk, I think I'll start by talking, I guess, initially about having a researcher mindset and what that sort of means to me. I'll then talk about what this means for the library and the profession more generally. And then lastly, I'll talk about my own decision around embarking on a PhD. So I guess to start with, thinking about myself, I consider myself very lucky and fortunate, really, because relatively early on in my career, I got exposed to research and I guess the benefits of being someone who's both a practitioner and a researcher. Again, I was lucky because I was able to connect with people who could mentor me, such as Biva, who's here today, and others. I was able to find people that could model for me the process of conceiving a research project, conducting it, and actually writing for publication. And what this all sort of did is it made this process quite transparent and accessible to me. It allowed me to see how work projects that I was only thinking about in sort of my local work context could be expanded out a little bit, with a bit more structure and guidance, could become something perhaps a little bit bigger. And through this process of, I guess, mentorship and ongoing collaborations, I eventually started to have a few publications under my belt, which was very exciting. And then I had people approaching me who wanted to collaborate with me, and the whole thing kind of grew from there. Even if you're not engaged in writing research publications yourself, being aware of the LIS literature, doing some reading is tremendously beneficial. For me, I've always found it very encouraging because it sort of surfaces that others in the profession are perhaps experiencing some of the same challenges at work that you are. But it also gives you ideas for things that you might want to take and implement in your local context. So even if you're not actively conducting research, I think engaging with the literature does make you better at your job. And in an academic library context, I think it's also very beneficial in terms of developing researcher empathy. And as a librarian, I was working to support researchers in the Faculty of Medicine and Health. And there's a particular area of work in health librarianship, which is around systematic reviews. And I guess extending that work a little bit is to actually co-author systematic reviews with researchers. And because I had some understanding of the research process, but also was sort of confident in the sort of skills that I was bringing as an information professional to those projects, it was something that I could advocate for and I guess develop more sort of equal partnerships with researchers. And again, all of this is serving to sort of build my own experience, but also credibility with academics who can have confidence that you have an understanding of the research process yourself. And I guess, again, thinking about these things also allowed me opportunities to contribute to the profession in other ways. So being part of groups such as LARK or the ALIA Research Advisory Committee, or being an associate editor for JALIA, has all sort of served to give me sort of a bigger perspective, I guess, for the profession that sort of takes you from the day-to-day professional job. And for me, I've found a lot of meaning through being engaged with those other projects. So to zoom out a little bit and to talk about the workplace, as someone who's now a library manager, I've been able to sort of support and mentor other staff in encouraging them to embark in research projects and to sort of think about these ideas too. And I should say that it's not all sunshine and roses. Often it does require you to sort of go above and beyond the hours of the work week. You do need to sort of put in the time. And it's often in addition to other work, but it's rewarding in a different way. And I think when you get enough people in an organization that kind of have that sensibility, you're really starting to build a research culture there. So, a group of like-minded people who see the value in doing a research project, in asking the right questions and in gathering data. And when you go outside the organization and you're then promoting this to the wider profession, it's also promoting the culture and what the individual library is doing as well. And I guess speaking to the profession more broadly, I think we're very, very lucky as LIS practitioners because there is this rich disciplinary kind of context that we can draw on. Something that I've been quite involved with recently is around the rollout of information and digital literacy at my university. And that idea sort of draws on decades of work that is present in the LIS literature. We bring real expertise and an understanding of this area, which I think makes us quite sort of unique within the university. And I think that by publishing and sharing our work, it makes what we're doing better, but it also elevates and lifts the entire profession. In terms of my own decision to do a PhD, you might ask, well, why? Because you were kind of already doing sort of research on the side. And I guess there's two things here. Firstly, I wanted the experience of going through formal research training, because it's not just about the research project that you do, but it's also the opportunity to meet fellow PhD students, to be part of that network at your university, and to have some real support structures in place around the research. And because it is a substantial undertaking, it also gives you the opportunity to tackle a very large scale kind of project. And reflecting on my PhD project, it gave me the opportunity to tackle a problem that I saw and experienced in practice. So my research is drawn from, I guess, a challenge that I was experiencing as a librarian working with researchers, in that I saw how managerialism and the use of research metrics are shaping research choices. And by talking to researchers, I was hearing sort of how these pressures were coming to bear in terms of, you know, the outlets that people chose to publish in, but also how they conceive their research projects. And this was an idea that I was experiencing kind of day to day. And I realized that through a PhD project, I could actually tackle it in a more substantive way and actually think about it more systemically. And I guess lastly, it could potentially be where my career goes next. You know, once I have finished this PhD, I might look towards academic jobs. But what I would say as well is that there are some benefits to being a professional who is doing research. My job isn't dictated by my research performance or the types of projects that I seek out. And so it's a very liberating and quite freeing part of the job, really, is that you do get the opportunity to pick up these topics that are of interest and not feel the same pressure that academic staff might experience around their research. So there's a lot of personal fulfillment that comes from that as well. So I think I might end it there, and thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Edward. Yeah, lots of good points there. Your project itself sounds really interesting and worthwhile. And something that I just want to highlight and link back to that Edward said was the value to the profession. As a practice profession, we don't actually have a lot of literature about what it means to be a library practitioner. Comparatively speaking. I mean, obviously, if you do a search on a database, you're going to find a lot of stuff. But there's not a huge amount, and there's even less coming from Australia. So I think it's really important for us as a profession, not only to give back to the profession, but to help to build the evidence base that the profession so desperately needs. And that's part of the reason why Helen Partridge and Lisa Given put together the LISRA grant application for ARC funding, which they were successful in, and I've popped that link up there. So have a look at that, have a look at what the perspective that they're coming from in creating that project and trying to really instill a research culture in our profession. So from two academic librarians, and it might seem like a fairly natural kind of segue for an academic librarian to do a PhD, we have Dr. Jo Kading. So she'll be able to give us a bit of a different perspective from the sense that she has finished part one, and part two, that she is a public librarian. She's not only a public librarian, she does do some work at the university as well, but it was her role in as a public librarian that inspired her to do her PhD. So hopefully Jo will give us a little bit of a different perspective. So over to you, Jo.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everyone. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so I'm hoping you can all see that. And Catherine, you can hear me fine?
Yes, all good.
Great. Okay. And yes, thank you. I was going to say I will be the thorn between the roses, or whatever it is, the one person who's not an academic librarian. So thank you for asking me to speak with you today. And I would recommend anybody who has a passion for a topic, who wants to find out more, and I guess really importantly believes in libraries, does a PhD. So I'm going to share my story and my reasons for doing a PhD with you today. So why I did a PhD. Essentially, I was really passionate about improving public library access to children with disabilities and their families. And so having a child with a disability who had experienced barriers to access and inclusion in public libraries, I felt I genuinely really wanted to kind of tackle this issue. And I was frustrated by what I could see happening in libraries in my own space. And I was also really frustrated by a lack of general awareness in this space and a complete dearth of research in this area. So when I started trying to improve, like looking at ways at how I could improve this within my own library space, I couldn't find anything. And I ended up having to look outside our discipline and look at allied health areas, etc. But I sort of thought I can't leave it at that, because it was sort of really nagging at me, and I felt that injustice of the parts of our community who weren't being served. And so I guess in the end, I really just wanted to make a change, and it's kind of sounds really altruistic, but I just wanted to make that change for the library profession and for families with children with disabilities. But it was actually my husband who really pushed me to applying for research grants, and he, really had that faith in, you need to do this. So after I won a few grants, it became really clear to me that my interest was also the interest of a lot of other people. And I thought, well, you know what, if I'm going to do this research, I'm going to make sure it's really respected. I'm going to make sure that the research has that greatest possible reach. And so I thought the best way for me to do this will be to turn it into a PhD. So I thought that's going to give me that opportunity to do justice to the topic and to also present my findings at national and international levels, which is exactly what it did do and continues to do. Okay, so if I'm thinking about what were the main benefits, I see them in sort of 4 areas: the work, community, personal, and family. So I'm both a team leader of programs in a public library, and I'm also a lecturer at UniSA in information management. So I really greatly value what being in both camps gives to me. So in my public library space, it really allows me to see how the theory works in my space, to see it gives me that deeper understanding and that deeper way of thinking about things, to really question the why, the what, the how of what we do in our library space. And it's changed, it's essentially changed the way I think about our practice, and it's given me that real confidence or understanding to start really challenging that and go, well, maybe we've always done it this way, or maybe we're, so really come to it with that analytical way of thinking. From the perspective of as a lecturer, once again, and as an academic, it's phenomenal what it allows me to do in terms of, for my students, once again, I can really show them what that theory looks like in practice, because I can essentially say, well, today, da, 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 da. And so it brings to life what I'm teaching for them. But it also allows me to really understand research questions and research from and put my practitioner head on, and I can sort of say, well, look, these are the research questions, but have we thought about this, because this is actually what happens on the floor. This is sort of what it really looks like when we look at it in practice. And so the two really dovetail really nicely together, and I guess just give me not just a better understanding of both theory and practice, but allow me to think in different ways in both areas. So from a professional development perspective, I've developed a huge range of skills, you know, from research skills to grant writing, to journal articles and reports, to presentation skills. My networking range and my skills in that area is huge as well. So you know, I've got networks in libraries, education, business, community, etc. And when I spent 3 months in the US and Canada, I developed amazing international network skills there. And I was really also, like, I learned so much about libraries in the international space, and I was able to bring that back to my academic work and my practitioner work. And I feel I have, you know, a network of colleagues I can contact and ask advice from all over the world. So I guess, and I think Fiona really touched on this as well, is that I feel connected to my profession on a much broader scale than I did otherwise. The other thing is that I actually feel like I'm also providing a role model for my public library colleagues and people within the public library service. And I do that by showing that there are so many other opportunities, and you can do it if you go for it. You know, so I guess it's really just demonstrating what is possible and what is out there. And I spend quite a bit of my time also just mentoring, particularly younger colleagues, and encouraging them to join ALIA groups and encouraging them to write articles. So I sort of, I have that mentoring role as well. And then I guess also from a work perspective, every time I speak, I'm actually marketing my public library anyway, and marketing public libraries. So, you know, as a result, we do have library professionals nationally and internationally sort of constantly in contact with our library. All right, so from a community perspective, obviously the focus of my PhD was very much on improving services for the community. But I was able to really share that information through journal articles and conferences, etc. So I feel I feel that I've had that opportunity to really get that information out and to support other libraries to start thinking about what they can do in this space, and supporting them to introduce and be more accessible and inclusive. So I think for me, just the fact that yesterday I gave a talk through ALIA as well on accessible online story times, and there were over 150 library professionals who joined in on that, indicates to me that I've gone some way. You know, obviously it's not all me, but you know, it's just wonderful that I've gone from where I started and I couldn't find anybody to work with in Australia, and now, you know, there's the level of interest is phenomenal. All right, now from a personal perspective, as I said, it really was my passion, and my PhD gave me that chance to really explore that and to move with that, and it helped me feel like I really was making a difference on a much broader scale than just Jo in her public library in the Adelaide Hills. It boosted my confidence enormously. Prior to doing my PhD, I'd been away from study for almost 20 years. I'd taken a whole pile of time off parenting. So I really was starting to feel like I was in quite a professional rut, and I guess losing a little bit of confidence in my capacity. And I just wanted to be more involved in the profession. So doing a PhD completely changed that for me. It gave me a professional purpose. It allowed me, I mean, I love learning and meeting new people and feeling like I guess I've got something to offer. And a PhD on a personal level really did that for me. And then finally, family. So as I said, I was really lucky to have a supportive family who believed in me and the importance of my PhD. They came on my journey with me. They gave me time to write. They cooked meals, did the washing. And when I was actually considering in the first place doing my PhD, and I was quite concerned it was going to impact my family time, my husband made the comment that me doing a PhD was actually an excellent role model for my girls. And when my eldest daughter was considering her options after year 12, she decided she wanted to do nursing. And I said to her, really, are you sure you want to do nursing? And she said, Mum, I know I want to do something in the health area. And nursing allows me to get into the health industry and have a look around. And she said, I'm not scared of post-grad study. And when I know where I want to be, I'll specialise. And she's actually just accepted a 3-year contract in ICU at the Royal Adelaide and is intending on doing her master's in critical care. So yes, I think it was worth it for my girls. And that is that. So hopefully that has inspired some of you and yeah, answered maybe some of your questions as well.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jo. I've known a little bit about your story from our past interactions and other times that I've seen you speak.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that last one. So that's that is amazing, and it is such a wonderful benefit and such a wondrful role model that you were able to do that. I remember when I finished my undergraduate degree, the last thing I wanted to do was more study. And that's because no one around me had done any. So yeah, that's a wonderful positive benefit that's come out of your PhD. And I think you're probably one of the rare people, I guess, who get to a PhD because they've actually seen something missing. I mean, a lot of us, obviously a PhD has to contribute to new knowledge, so there has to be a gap there somewhere. But you really wanted to do something to fix it, and there wasn't, as you said, there wasn't the literature around, and the perfect gap for you. So that's absolutely fantastic. Thank you very much to all of our speakers. I think you've managed very successfully to articulate what is often very intangible benefits of having and doing a PhD, and particularly how it relates to your practice and to you personally. So thank you ever so much. I think it's been absolutely valuable. If there are any questions in the chat, I haven't seen any, or would people rather I can unmute everyone, allow people to be unmuted, and people can pop their virtual hand up if they wish. Let me just...
I did spy a question from earlier, Catherine.
Oh, yeah.
And that was one from Gemma. And Gemma writes, are the presenters doing their PhD via the traditional route or via the PhD by publication route? And thoughts on these options, pros and cons?
Yeah, I did see that question. So who would like to answer?
I might kick things off because I've started talking. This is an interesting one. And I guess it goes back to one of the points that I've mentioned around there being, not the same sort of imperatives and pressures on practitioners as there are to those who are sort of academic staff. I guess I had originally conceived my work as a kind of monograph. I thought, I've got this big story to tell. I wanted in a format that will be later able to be converted into a book, and that's kind of an output that I'm quite passionate about and sort of want to get to. But then through conversations with my supervisors, they were sort of pushing me towards the thesis with publications route. The argument being that it allows you to sort of build up your track record a little bit. But they also said to me that they would question whether doing thesis with publications precludes you from doing a monograph later down the road. So I guess that was something sort of for me to think about. So at the moment, going with thesis with publications as, I guess, a strategic kind of move.
Excellent, thank you. Fiona, Joe?
I'm doing mine the traditional route, though I must say I have had conversations about the thesis by publication route with my supervisor. I think the thing about that is, in some ways, I think it could be harder, because you have to string it together, and it has to be coherent, you know. So the traditional route seems maybe it makes more sense to me anyway. And also I have a lot of publications already, so I don't need to build up that publication track. But yeah, I know people who have done both, and I think that they're both good options.
And I did the traditional route, and I think potentially it really depends also on your topic. And so for me, I don't think publications would have allowed me to do the sort of research that I did. So I think it probably, it would have just changed it and not been the way I wanted it to be. So I think potentially it probably rests a little bit more on your topic and what sort of research, like how you're doing your research, that would probably determine which is a better fit for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And while we're on that topic, I'm just jumping over a couple of questions, which I will come back to, but there's a question from Louise. Apparently, if you go thesis by publication, you are still required to submit it for examination. Is this true? This is absolutely true. So generally speaking, the research by publication is you do, let's say for argument's sake, 3 publications, and then you write that up, linking those 3 things together. So your common theme might be that you did all case studies, or whatever. So you do end up writing a monograph, in a sense, a one item that goes off to examiners to be examined. So you may hear some people saying, oh, thesis by publication is the easy way. No, it's absolutely not. And I'm hoping, my sense anyway, is that kind of attitude is dissipating a bit, and for good reason. No PhD is an easy PhD, but they are, as our speakers have shown, they are very enjoyable and enriching and rewarding. So just going back to some of the earlier questions, Rebecca would like to know how we can join the SA LARK. I was going to hand over to Susanna to say that, but I've just realised that you said SA LARK. The SA LARK is basically the same as the as LARK. So there was a link earlier, I think, no, I didn't put the link earlier, to a blog post. I will put that up in a moment, and you can join from there. And then again, watch out for emails from me. I guess from me. I haven't really worked out how this is going to work for you, Susanna, but we'll muddle along.
Well, I think I would just say we are very much a grassroots group. So yeah, it is always in conversation. Join, follow the blog, join the mailing list. There is a Facebook presence, and we basically promote all the events in one go.
Yes, yeah, Pretty much. But Rebecca, if you want to email me at Swinburne, you can do that, or I can find your email address and we'll hook up later. Specifically for the ALIA LARK. That's that one.
Now, Marianne had wanted to say something, but it's
sorry,
saying
Marianne.
her hand's up and her mic's on, but she seems to be muted.
Oh, let me see if, can I unmute you, Marianne?
Nobody seems to be able to hear me.
Oh, there we go. Yes, I can hear you now.
Yep.
You're very, very quiet.
Sorry to butt in because there's lots more questions, but I just wanted to capture that conversation about the PhD by publication and by the book. Just to say to people who are thinking of doing it, that every institution has different rules around their PhD. And so some you can do both ways, some you can do one way or another, and some, but all of them are very rigorous. And as far as I'm aware, all of the ones that are by publication, you have to tie together by an exegesis, beginning and end. And it has to be on a cohesive topic. So it can't just be a random set of articles about, you know, the general topic that you're interested in. It still has to form a cohesive whole.
Yes.
So,
most universities are stopping the publication one. It's not possible anymore to enroll in a PhD by publication anymore. You enroll in a traditional PhD, but along the way, if you ended up publishing enough from that same topic and PhD, towards the end, you can call it a PhD by compilation. And so you put together all the articles you published, but then you again string together the story of the whole research through those articles. I think we have someone here who's recently finished that. Vasiliki, are you here?
I am.
Would you mind talking a bit about that, Vasiliki?
Yeah, I didn't set out to do a PhD by publication. I think it accidentally happened, and a big part of it has to, I have to give my thanks to JALIA, because they had, I published in JALIA in 2012, and it was like an overview of where I was going to explore. So I come from the public library background as well, and it was practitioner questions that, like Joe, that led me to mine. But along the way, I published in both library journals and in popular culture journals. And I had enough that actually worked, and they all fit together, and there was very little overlap. But I had to actually approach the research committee and set up an argument as to why a compilation would be better than just a traditional PhD. And in the end, I actually had couching statements to put everything in. It was like doing a meta discussion of each paper and how it fit into a broader, into the broader question, how each part of the publication. So yeah, I don't know if you want me to speak more to that, Buva, but yes, I'm happy to answer anyone's questions on those. I am on Twitter if you want to send me questions. Yeah, and I'll put my details in the chat. Thank you.
Thanks, Vasiliki.
Brilliant, thank you. So yeah, as you can see, there is a whole different aspect to PhD by publication. There was a question about doing your PhD in part-time mode or full-time mode. So I'll direct that back to our speakers.
Oh, sorry. Go on, Joe.
Oh, I was just going to say, I actually did a combination of all of those. So I started part-time. I then got a scholarship, and I went to full-time for a year, and then I went back part-time. But overall, it took me 4 years. So I did a combination of full and part-time. And I guess it's just one of those things where you have to really work out what's going to work for your work, home, financial situation. But I was a little bit determined not to go on too long, because I'm quite aware of my own shortcomings in that space, and I just knew if it dragged out, I would just lose all enthusiasm for it. And so I'd made a decision. I was powering through no matter what it took. And in fact, I had big surgery in the middle of one of them, but that worked out okay, because then I could lie in bed for several like 8 weeks and just I got a whole chapter done. So I don't recommend that, but you know, there are strategies.
Great, thanks, Jo. Fiona?
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons for both as well. I have not had the experience of being full-time. I would like to, but it's unlikely that I will. But part-time's good too, but you just have to be prepared that sometimes things in your life get in the way, you know, and you just have to, you know, whether it's caring responsibilities or, you know, change of job, or, you know, things just happen that when it's going over many years, we just have to say, I'm going to pay attention to something else now for a while, and then come back to it.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you.
Yeah, for me, so part-time as well, it wasn't sort of practical to be doing it full-time. I would say I still haven't found the perfect kind of mix of juggling the two responsibilities. So kind of my current strategy is to, you know, save up the leave and then have sort of a block of time where I'm just focused on the PhD. That's what's kind of working for me at the moment. Another thing I would say as well is that when I first embarked on it, I thought that it was helpful, because it's on a related topic to my professional work, to kind of lump it in with the professional work and have it sort of as an extension of the job. But in my experience, I found that wasn't actually all that helpful, because sort of the mindset that you need to be in for writing and working on a PhD, for me, is very different to the professional work, and it just became kind of too much to sort of blur the lines. So in some ways, I've focused on how they require a different approach to work, less so the fact that there is a crossover of topic. But that's just for me.
Excellent.
That's right. We had 2 raised hands at some point.
Yep, and there's a lot of questions in the chat too. So I might just, we've got some written down. Trish has asked a very, very good question. And I'll maybe just direct this to Ed, rather than getting all 3 of you to answer. I'm curious, so Trish has asked, I'm curious as to how the speakers found their supervisors. Any tips for people considering doing a PhD who are not currently attached to a university in finding supervisors? Great question.
That is a good question, and I'm not sure if my advice will be all that helpful on this one, but I had my sort of existing connection to Buva through UTS, but working at the University of Sydney, I wanted kind of a supervisor there, so Buva was able to suggest some people there. But then I also, you know, met with a number of potential supervisors at the business school at Sydney, and I found that there were some people who kind of gelled and sort of understood, I guess, how I wanted to approach this topic. And there were some people that just weren't interested at all. And at that point, you sort of cut your losses and you don't try and force the issue. But I guess looking for a supervisor who has their own sort of interest in the topic, not that they're going to direct you to kind of see the problem in the same way that they do, but there's enough of an interest there that they're sort of prepared to go along this journey with you. I think it's important.
Yeah.
Another thing, Catherine, I'll just add to that as well, is think about who you're reading and whose writing really resonates with you and who's writing in those areas of interest, because those people may actually, you know, if they're in universities around the place, may be interested in supervising you as well.
Absolutely. And I will plug ALIA and the ALIA Research Committee. If you have absolutely no idea, just get in touch with ALIA. They can put you on to people in the research committee, and we can work with you to help find someone. Phoebe, you have your hand up. I've allowed you to unmute yourself. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Catherine. Thank you everyone for speaking. My question was about what kind of hot research topics you see going on at the moment? Because often these things go through waves, and a particular decade or half a decade will have a big focus on a particular area or theory. And so I was wondering if there's anything you see now or coming in the next 5 years, 10 years that are the big hot topics in library and information research.
Jo, would you like to answer that so you can provide a bit of a different perspective? With
Okay, I was going to say my biggest downfall is I'm constantly seeing research. I'm always seeing it, and I think that's because I just constantly I'm looking at things happening in our space. So for me, I think a really big area within public libraries is digital literacy, but digital literacy working with the community. So, you know, so I think there's a lot of work that can be done in what is the best way to actually support the community to be digitally literate in this space. What are, you know, so what are we currently doing? And also I see a big space for digital literacy and the aged community. So I really want to look at us at libraries rolling that out in that space. Yes, so at the moment, I think that's a really big one, but oh gosh, I just spend my whole life thinking, oh, that's another thesis. I don't have that much time to do all of these. and you know, just, oh my gosh, the fact that, for example, we're looking at, and I'm not going to get started on this because I know it'll probably upset lots of people, but centralized purchasing of collections. Honestly, we need to do some more research in that space. You know, what is the impact it's going to have on all of these other smaller libraries? What impact does it have on the nuanced collections that libraries develop for their communities? And I will stop because I really do have. So Phoebe, maybe I should just speak with you personally about this.
And there is an ALIA research grant available. That actually is a really good and really interesting topic. We have 1 minute left, so if you do have to leave, totally understand. But in the chat, a couple of people have noted that Peter Macaulay is here. Pete did a PhD on doing PhDs. So Pete, would you like to just talk a little bit about what you did and how you did it?
Thank you very much. Actually, I've been out of the system for a long time now because I retired early, but it's one of the most marvellous experiences that you can get. But I think you need to be really strategic with your topic so that it is what you want to do in the future or aligns with your organisation. And Jo, Fiona and Edward have all spoken about those types of things. I think you need to be very strategic with your supervisor as well. You should choose them, and that seems it's not as hard as you think. And you should align with others and try and go for things like Australian Research Council grants once you've got your PhD and you have got superior information literacy skills. I don't know whether you still use that terminology these days, but you've got that, and that saves you from anecdotal evidence about 6 months of your candidature because of the skill levels that you all possess. Anyway, anyone can contact me. I'd love to talk to them personally. I don't do seminars these days, but I'll be happy to talk to anyone individually. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Pete, and lovely to have you here. Lovely to see you. So we do, we're all passionate, as hopefully that is something that's come across. You know, as Pete said, he hasn't been in the scene for since taking early retirement, but he's still passionate about what he does. I'm absolutely passionate about what I do and about any sort of research. I was talking to someone the other day, and we're looking at doing some research, and she said, well, what are your passions? And I said, well, apart from this one thing, I'm happy to do anything. So it is absolutely infectious. And I know a lot of people, and maybe this was the case for you, Ed, you'd already published and you just got a little bit of a taste for research. And once you get a taste for research, it kind of takes over your life, but in a good way. So hopefully we've all shown our passions and our passion for research and doing advanced study. One thing that I would highlight though, if you don't think that you're either ready or that you have the time commitment or whatever to do a PhD, think about doing a master's by research. You still get to do a thesis. It's a bit smaller, but you will go through exactly the same processes. You still have to come up with a research question. You still have to identify a topic. You still have to do proper research methods. And it can be up to half the time of a PhD. Or even if you're not quite sure if you want to do a PhD, maybe start the master's by research, either get to the end of it and graduate, or you can actually upgrade partway through. So it's a good way of dipping your toe in the water to see if you like it. Or just start a small research project in your library with someone who knows about what proper research is. I've talked about proper research on the LARK blog, which I haven't put on the link yet, on the chat yet. I think we should wrap up there. We're a couple of minutes over time. Thank you everyone for attending. I hope you've gotten something out of this. If you have any more questions, feel free to Google us. Most of us are on Twitter or Facebook, or our email addresses are available somewhere. Feel free to get in touch. We're really, really happy to talk to people about research and getting more people on the research bandwagon. So thank you again very, very much for our speakers. I can't thank you enough. It's been wonderful hearing your stories and to have a lot of my experiences validated as well, which is great. And I hope for you, the audience, it has been really worthwhile for you as well. So I'll close off there. Hope everyone has a wonderful festive season, however you choose to celebrate. Please do stay safe though, and we will see you all again in the new year. Thanks everyone. Bye now.
Bye. Thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Jo. My pleasure. Thank you so much.
Just wanted to say is also thank you all. That was fantastic. Thanks for running that so smoothly, Catherine.
Oh, thanks, Trish. Oh, it was amazing, wasn't it? Our speakers were great.
Absolutely perfect.
Yeah.
And I think I've dumped all of the references you mentioned into the chat, so hopefully.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, I did forget to put the link to the LARK blog where a lot of, oh yes, it's on there.
Susanna put it in too.
That's fantastic. So if anyone's missed anything, hopefully they'll get to us.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
Yeah, excellent.
Brilliant.
Thanks for coming.
Happy summer. Ciao.
See you later. Bye.
Thank you, Catherine.
Pleasure, Boover. Thanks for
Thanks,
coming.
Susanna.
Bye.
Susanna, we should meet up for in real life soon.
Oh.
Yes, I'm just asking Catherine to stop recording.
Oh.